and welcome to episode 71 of Toke Signals TV, where we bring you the biggest in cannabis and hemp news stories every week. I'm Steve Elliott, the editor at TokeSignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. First, let's look at our Toke Signals bud pick of the week. What we have here is some Sledgehammer Haze, a sativa. I got the genetics from Secret Seeds in Seattle. There's no price attached to this flower because I grew it myself. And it is some excellent stuff. Actually, it's the last of the sativa haze, so there's a little bit of a wistful feeling as I look at that. Let's do the news now, shall we? In the United States, a federal judge is weighing the constitutionality of marijuana's classification. This federal judge in California is looking at the constitutionality of the classification of cannabis as a Schedule I drug, right up there along with heroin and LSD. For 45 years now, cannabis has been erroneously classified, you see, as being among the most dangerous drugs in the world, with a high potential for abuse and no medical uses. The definition of a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act, which was adopted as President Nixon's war on drugs kicked off. U.S. District Judge Kimberly J. Mueller in Sacramento held a 5-day fact-finding hearing on the classification question at the end of 2014. And with final argument scheduled for February, her ruling is expected later this year. Judge Mueller's decision to hold the hearing came after a pretrial defense motion in a federal case against accused marijuana growers. Prosecutors unsuccessfully tried to block these fact-finding hearings. Even if the judge rules against the federal classification of cannabis, it would apply only to the defendants in this particular case and would almost certainly be appealed, according to the LA Times. It would take a ruling from the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals determining that the law is unconstitutional to affect all the western states. The defendants' attorneys have argued that the federal marijuana law violates that constitutional guarantee of equal protection under the law, contending the government enforces the law unevenly, allowing distribution of cannabis in states where it is legal and punishing it elsewhere. The prosecution contends that Congress legally placed marijuana in Schedule I of the Controlled Substances Act. Scientific understanding and societal acceptance of cannabis have grown since courts last looked at pot's federal classification, according to Xenia K. Gilg, a lawyer for the growers. Gilg pointed to last November's elections in which Alaska and Oregon voters joined Colorado and Washington in making marijuana legal for adult recreational use. About half of the states provide some legal protection for the use of cannabis as medicine, but prosecutors claimed in a January 7 brief that the evidence presented in the hearing at most established that there is some dispute among doctors as to whether marijuana is medicine. In California this week, a Native American marijuana farm will open next month, it was announced. A Northern California Native American tribe has announced it is building a $10 million indoor marijuana cultivation facility just north of Ukiah. The tribes are just getting out ahead of the game, said Mendocino County Supervisor Dan Hamburg. Legalization is coming, said Dale Geringer, California State Coordinator for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. It looks like it'll be the tribes. The Pinoleville Pomo Nation has contracted with United Cannabis, based in Colorado, and Fox Berry Companies, based in Kansas, to grow thousands of marijuana plants in greenhouses on its 99-acre rancheria. Foxberry, which, interestingly enough, also invests in tribal casinos, is bankrolling and managing the project. This is believed to be the first California tribe to build a large cannabis growing facility, but at least 2 more are already planned at other locations in the state by the same corporations behind the Ukiah operation. Those 2 locations are still undisclosed, other than that they will be in Central and Southern California. Now, the Ukiah operation will be a nearly 110,000 square foot facility on about 2.5 acres, and it's scheduled to open in February, according to representatives of the groups. About a third of the rancheria is held in federal trust, which frees the companies from following all local regulations and most state laws as well. Mendocino County officials are clucking about that lack of accountability. They can do whatever they want, said Mendocino County Chief Executive Officer Carmel Angelo. The tribe won't be subject to the county's zoning ordinance, which limits the number and locations of cannabis plants grown for medical use. The tribe also owns 100 acres near Ukiah High School, for which it is seeking federal trust status. The tribe hadn't notified county officials of its plans. Now, of course, under federal rules, they don't have to. I'm a bit taken aback, said County Supervisor Curry Brown, noting that many tribes consult with the county about development projects as a courtesy, quote unquote, even though they are exempt from its planning process. None of this really surprises me, said Hamburg. I just wish there was more we could do about it. My heart is really with the small grower community, he said. Hamburg has a good point there. It's great that the advent of Native American marijuana is going to make cannabis more available to those who need and want it, but not so good that the business is apparently being handed over to big corporations on a silver platter. What about the mom and pop operations that got us here? Hamburg said big indoor farms like the planned facility create more negative ecological impacts than smaller outdoor gardens. From an ecological perspective, that does not sit well with me, he said of the tribe's operation. In a memorandum at the request of tribes seeking clarification on marijuana, the U.S. Justice Department said it's up to tribes, as sovereign nations, to decide if cannabis is legal on their lands. But the memo adds that nothing prevents federal authorities from enforcing U.S. law in Indian country. In Ohio, 2 marijuana legalization ballot measures emerge. Not one, but 2 proposed ballot measures to legalize cannabis have emerged in Ohio within the past month. On Thursday, Ohioans to End Prohibition announced the latest, the Cannabis Control Amendment, which will legalize cannabis sales, use, and possession for adults 21 and older. The group hopes to get that measure on the 2016 ballot. Responsible Ohio in December had announced another proposal which calls for 10 authorized growing locations around the state. Ohioans to End Prohibition Vice President Jacob Wagner said the new measure was different in that it would not restrict those who want to grow marijuana at home for personal use, just commercial sales. Any amendment that might consolidate the prospective economic power of a legal cannabis market in the hands of a chosen few is a raw deal for the people of Ohio. Ohioans to End Prohibition President Sri Kavaru and Attorney Jacob Wagner wrote in a Thursday press release. Kavaru and Wagner said in an interview they plan to announce their plan later this year, but announced early after reports surfaced that the group was planning an amendment for the November 2015 ballot. Responsible Ohio hopes to get its measure on the fall ballot. It would allow adults 21 and older to buy marijuana as they do alcohol through a market system taxed and regulated by the state. Tax proceeds would go to local communities where residents could approve or deny marijuana retail locations at the ballot box. Ohioans to End Prohibition want a system where authorized medical marijuana patients could get ID cards for buying their cannabis tax-free. We really just want to help Ohio get control over cannabis, production, retail, revenues, Wagner said. We want to give the people of Ohio a grip on this problem. Last year, the Ohio Rights Group didn't gather enough signatures to get its measure on the ballot. That group says it is also working to put an issue on the 2015 ballot to legalize medical marijuana, and says it has collected more than 150,000 signatures on petitions, reports Randy Ludlow of the Columbus Dispatch. Any of the cannabis campaigns would need at least 305,591 valid signatures of registered voters to get an initiative on the ballot for a vote. In Illinois this week, medical marijuana is in limbo as a hostile GOP governor takes office. Illinois patients who were still waiting for safe access to medical marijuana were once again left disappointed on Monday when outgoing Democratic Governor Pat Quinn not only failed to award licenses to growers and dispensaries before leaving office, but he actually tightened the state's already strict medical marijuana laws in one of his final acts in office. I was livid, said State Representative Lou Lang, the Democrat from Skokie, who has been a longtime friend of medical marijuana patients in Illinois. He originally sponsored Illinois' medical marijuana law. I think the governor made a serious and grievous mistake today, Lang said. Patient advocates had hoped Governor Quinn would get the program off the ground by issuing licenses before incoming Republican Governor Bruce Rauner, who ridiculed the medical marijuana program during his election campaign, was sworn in on Monday. While medicinal cannabis has been legal for more than a year now in Illinois, the state violated its own deadline at the end of 2014 to issue licenses. Patients have yet to benefit from the law. It is time to take the politics out of this issue and help these patients and families get safe and legal access to this medicine, said Dan Lynn, the executive director of the Illinois chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Without these licenses being issued soon, hope is running out for some of these patients who are depending on these facilities to be opening soon so that their medicine will be legally available. According to Lynn, there isn't really a solid definitive answer why no dispensaries have won approval to grow. Under the tightened restrictions signed by the outgoing Quinn on Monday, state officials can now impose fines and other penalties rather than just revoking licenses on anyone who violates the strict medical marijuana law. Growers, patients, and caregivers now face even tougher criminal background checks. While Quinn can make small cosmetic changes to the law, he can't change the intent, according to Representative Lang. I don't think the changes are going to stick in that form. It will have to be done with a separate piece of legislation, Lang said. Lang said the snafu was Quinn's fault. State agencies told me they made their choices for licenses and were just waiting on the governor's signature, he said. The blame lies squarely on his shoulders. The inexplicable unwillingness of Governor Quinn to finish the job on the medical marijuana program means one thing: unnecessary, prolonged pain and suffering of very sick people, Representative Lang said. The people suffering from cancer, epilepsy, and other diseases will be further victimized by the governor's failure to do his job. Quinn spokesman Grant Klinsman made the lame excuse that the process of awarding licenses to dispensaries and cultivation centers shouldn't be rushed out last minute. A particularly ironic thing to say after patients have been waiting for years for this bill to pass, and for months since it was passed into law. Hundreds of businesses were awaiting Quinn's decision after sending in applications under the law setting up the medical marijuana pilot project. The state had been planning to award licenses to 21 medical marijuana cultivation centers, one in each Illinois State Police District. Lang said the state collected $5 million in fees from the roughly 400 applicants wanting to open dispensaries and cultivation centers. This single failure may doom the medical cannabis program, Lang said. This single failure said to all of these folks that made applications to be cultivators or dispensary owners that we took your $5 million, but we'll get back to you when we feel like it. Governor Rauner, who was inaugurated on Monday, is now in charge of the medical marijuana licensing process. Rauner has criticized the selection process as subject to cronyism. During his campaign for governor, the venture capitalist suggested just auctioning the licenses off to the highest bidders. With yet more delays now occurring in a pilot program set to expire in 2017, some discouraged patients are speculating the law might never result in any safe access at all. It might, in fact, expire before it ever serves a single patient. Here we sit again at the whims of the politicians and what they decide they're going to do, said multiple sclerosis patient Julie Falco of Chicago. People are definitely frustrated. The patients are really upset that they are waiting, said Lynn of Illinois Normal. Some very sick people were hurt, Lang said on Tuesday, and some very innocent people were hurt yesterday, and some very innocent families were hurt yesterday, from a person who has spent his life talking about health care. The state of Illinois has a responsibility to fulfill its obligations under the law, Lang said. We did not do that. In Iowa this week, sad news where Benton McKenzie dies after being a center of the medical marijuana debate. Benton McKenzie, the Scott County, Iowa man who was convicted on marijuana charges after he used it to treat his cancer, died early on Monday. McKenzie, his wife Loretta, and their son Cody were all convicted of manufacturing marijuana after 71 cannabis plants were confiscated from their home in May 2013. Heartless cops initially had even charged McKenzie's elderly parents as well, but those charges were later dropped. Benton admitted in his July 2014 testimony that he used cannabis oil from the plants to treat his angiosarcoma. According to McKenzie, some of the tumors diminished in size due to the treatments, with some eventually even vanishing after he used the oil. He wasn't allowed to say in court that he had cancer or that he had used cannabis oil from his plants to treat it. Both McKenzie and his wife appealed their convictions after they were each given 3 years of probation. Their son was given a suspended sentence. A GoFundMe account was established to try to help the family move to Oregon, where cannabis oil is legal, for treatment of his condition. In Washington state this week, a judge ruled that the state can't ban doctors from advertising marijuana authorizations. A Superior Court judge in Pierce County, Washington, has ruled unconstitutional a state law which forbids doctors and other medical professionals from advertising medical marijuana authorizations in their advertisements. Judge Elizabeth Martin, in a Friday ruling, said the law violates both the Washington and the U.S. constitutions by curbing free speech. While the state might have an interest in regulating such advertising, Martin ruled, banning it completely is unacceptable. I find the statute impermissibly overbroad, as it chills even informational speech and aims solely at public education, Judge Martin wrote in her decision. That ruling came in a case brought by Scott Havsey, a Pierce County osteopath. He took the state to court last year after the Washington Department of Health punished him for advertising his willingness to authorize patients' use of medicinal cannabis. The sanctions levied against Dr. Havsey have been on hold while the court case plays out. Havsey, who has practiced for more than 30 years, authorizes a number of patients for medical marijuana. Attorney Mark G. Olson of Everett argued that the state's ban on medical marijuana advertising hindered the ability of patients to find doctors willing to authorize them for cannabis use. The only restrictions that should be placed on professional advertising are to be sure the advertising is not false or misleading, Olson said. Other than that, when the government restricts advertising by professionals, it places a chilling effect on the free flow of information, especially on the internet. Dr. Havsey cannot claim constitutionally protected commercial speech in his advertisement for the medical use of marijuana because marijuana is illegal under federal law and the medical use of marijuana remains illegal under state law, claimed Assistant Attorney General Joyce A. Roper, representing Washington State. Free speech protections do not extend to advertisements for an illegal product or activity, she claimed. But Judge Martin sided with Havsey. I find that the restriction set forth in the statute at issue is far more extensive than necessary, as it bars any advertisement in any form regardless of the message, format, context, etc., the judge wrote in her decision. The result of this statute is that the public cannot be informed by any healthcare provider, including Dr. Havsey, as to whether that provider is even available or willing to perform the required medical exam for the certificate of use, the judge wrote. Judge Martin wrote that she recognizes the state of Washington and its citizens have embarked on what the state has characterized as a grand national experiment with the legalization of marijuana, and further recognizes that the existing medical marijuana laws are not entirely reconciled with the recreational use of marijuana legalized by Initiative 502. I do not take lightly the import of this decision and expect that this ruling will not be the final word on the subject, Judge Martin said. Finally this week, news from Israel, where the Green Leaf Party offers marijuana in the future for campaign donations now. One political party in Israel is offering marijuana for campaign donations. The only catch is it's marijuana in the future for campaign donations right now. This gimmick, launched in a YouTube video on Saturday, helped the Green Leaf Al-Yaraq party get more than 100,000 new shekels, which equals about $25,000 United States, in donations this week. Donors who give campaign donations are promised they will receive cannabis if and when the day comes that the plant is legalized in Israel. The party on Monday morning opened a Head Start fundraising campaign with a range of options for donors. The page includes a sliding scale of hypothetical amounts of marijuana along with corresponding contribution levels. A donation of $12.50 entitles the donor to a savings bond redeemable for 1 gram of marijuana once it's legalized. That's significantly less than the black market street value of weed in Israel, where it runs $20 to $25 a gram. By Wednesday, all 56 available for that donation had been purchased. For $105, donors theoretically receive 5 grams of weed, plus an Al-Yaraq t-shirt and a collectible lighter. Those who give $2,500 will theoretically get help to open a coffee shop if and when cannabis is legalized and Israel hosts Netherlands-style coffee shops where marijuana is sold and consumed on site. So far, the party has received 1 donation at the coffee shop level, which also includes a gift of 150 grams of cannabis. 20 of the 420 shekel donations were received. Those are the $105 ones. That works out to 420 shekels. The donations totaled 115,285 shekels by Wednesday, and the party announced on Facebook that it now has a goal of $75,000 US, which is 300,000 shekels, to fund a nationwide billboard campaign. We've done all this with no budget. Imagine what we could do with a party budget and 5 parliamentarians, Al-Yaraq party head Oren Leibovitz said in a campaign video posted on Saturday. We are 500,000 cannabis smokers in Israel. It's enough that only a quarter of us vote Al-Yaraq, and change will be here. The Knesset in March made it more difficult this time around to make it into the governing body, raising the threshold from 2% of the vote to 3.25%. The Green Leaf Party has run in 5 previous elections and has failed to make it to the Knesset. We'll see if this gets them in this time. Hope to see you next week. Until then, stay lifted.